FSC. Then if it's certified, then consumers in Europe can then buy happily and say it's FSC certified, it's okay. But the impact on health, on society, on culture, on displacement, in particular in South Africa, where the industrial plantation model was linked to the forced removal of people from their area, and the expansion of an European settler economy was so very massive. That is something that is one of the most important aspects in terms of the communities being able to resist this, because there's another crisis added to this, the crisis of imagination, the lack of ability of local leaders and people to even begin to think of themselves outside these words like poverty. Someone with a head of cattle above 7 or 30 can be considered poor in Africa with a piece of land, because the way we think of the African economy now is what is learned and pushed by the Anglo-Saxon economists, the Keynesian economists. You've got to look for work, you have to look for a job. Even when you have the land, the system and the governing system do not make sure that those people with land, I'm one of the, I think of myself as one of the last generation of people who grew up on a piece of land, went to school from selling vegetables from a 3-acre piece of land, looking after cattle and goats, and that was our wealth. We didn't think of ourselves as poor because some people somewhere in Wisconsin or London or Oxford or Harvard University thought we were poor because we didn't have $2 a day. But that is what has been lost, that imagination of a different way of organizing the economy, away from looking for a job, where families as the institutions that kept society and the economy and the environment together and intact were split, men going to the mining companies where they stayed for 6 months to the whole year, and women remaining. That displacement, the whole displacement of labor, is what this capitalist system does in Africa. In Europe, families would stay together. When someone gets a job, they go there. But you have a situation where the husband works in Cape Town, the family stays with the family in the Eastern Cape. It brings on all the other problems we have had, HIV, AIDS, street kids, and a lot of dysfunctionality in the society. So in my work, when looking at the plantation model, I look at a society as the economy as a holistic, not just an environmental issue, just a social issue, because the African society as it was originally before being affected was included all these things together within the family, within the institution of community. We had our religious leaders who were also the rainmakers, who through their work worked with the environment, nurtured certain trees. There were trees that would not be cut, there were certain animals that would not be killed. But the destruction of all this ethos of that community makes any kind of negative impact, any kind of intrusion or any modification have much more disastrous impacts than anywhere else in the world where these systems have not been impacted on. So in terms of the way, one of the things we've started to look at is how can we recreate that community resilience to be able on the ground to begin to say how can the communities impacted by these plantations mitigate these through land reform processes that allow the massification of production of food, food security, food sovereignty, and the control of all these things. So at Timberwatch we do not compartmentalize these struggles as different. They are the same. It's the same struggle about HIV, AIDS, it's the same struggle about domestic violence, it's the same struggle about anything human rights you can think about, because the capitalist model is structured in such a way that it puts people in these compartments so that it creates dependence. And I think that's what that moral revulsion against that model, particularly within the African context where indigenous knowledge system begins to be in the forefront. Even in our responses in this struggle, if local communities can also be brought to a point where they begin to have their voice in the mitigation, in the adaptation, we do not need any carbon or these false solutions, red CDMs and so forth, that take away land, because those local communities have been on that land, in the rivers, and sustained them. Thank you.
Plantations are a really big issue. I mean, we're a semi-arid country. We're struggling for water. Plantations just dry out our rivers. And in fact, this is very struggling to